So, hello, Samuel William here. This is Truth You Can Wake Up To, and it's the 13th of the 3rd month, 2013, which is a pretty unlucky date. It's currently 12:39 on a Wednesday afternoon, and of course I'm here in North London in my little booth. Now, this episode, as you may have realised, is called Les Misyriables. Les Misyriables, which, of course, is a takeoff from Les Misérables, which is one of the more famous musical theatrical productions of all time. And what I've done there is I've sneaked in the word Syria. You may have noticed that. Now, the meaning of this will become very evident by the end of this little episode. Now, I was going to call this episode What's Going On in Syria, but then I realised that I would have to do a whole back history of the whole development of Syria and all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't what I wanted to focus this episode on. What I wanted to focus this episode on is something that was pointed out to me quite recently. I guess a subscriber or somebody who watches my videos, somebody called Eric C4. And this will show how good my editing skills are. I'll put his name here, and if you click on that, that'll take you to his YouTube channel. It'll open up a separate window, so you can check him out if you want to. Because thank you, Eric, for opening my eyes, because my eyes were opened as soon as Eric told me that children were being used in a propaganda exercise to get public support for Syria. I started to see it everywhere. Everywhere I went. And if you live in a town or a city in the United Kingdom, you've probably been subjected to images like this. Now, this is on trains, this is on buses, this is in high streets, it's on the television, it's when you go into the supermarket, they play it on the electric screens. Basically, everywhere you go, you're subjected to this face. And this is the face of a poor little, cute, dirty Syrian refugee child. And, of course, this is to pull at the heartstrings. This is why this is similar to a dog charity using a puppy dog rather than an ugly mutt. They've got the image of a cute little child, so people go, "Oh no! I must help these poor Syrians because they're being hurt by that terrible, terrible man, Assad." This is a psychological technique. Of course, where have we seen this before? How does this work so well to tug on our heartstrings? Well, are you familiar with this? This, one of the more famous sort of production posters for Les Misérables, which is of a poor, dirty, broken girl called Cosette, who is trapped amongst a revolution, amongst rebels who are giving their lives against a tyrannical, evil government. It's like we've heard this narrative before. This storyline, this plot line, we've heard this before. Because this is what's going on in Syria, and that is what the plot line of the new Hollywood blockbuster of Les Misérables is about. A little dirty blonde girl, trapped, caught up amongst the violence of a revolution. But with one crucial difference. Now, I want to illustrate a point here. If I, as a revolutionary, look, this is my stance. I am a revolutionary. I'm wearing my military garb. I'm a revolutionary. And I've decided that David Cameron no longer can rule this country with his tyrannical, horrible crony government. His state is ill. and I am the solution. Now, if I were to cause, using social networks, a populist revolution, a spring, an uprising down in Parliament Square, and it became violent, and we started hurling rocks at the police, do you think the police would be violent back? I think they probably would. Now, if the police were very violent against my revolutionary forces against David Cameron, if the police were very, very violent, in fact got the army down there because I was such a tough opponent, the army had to come down, do you think they would be violent against me? Yes. So violent, in fact, that I started to lose the battle. In comes a foreign, powerful nation, and they buy me a tank, and they buy all of my friends tanks, and Sam's revolutionary army that's storming Whitehall and the Cabinet Office, storming through those gates of 10 Downing Street in our tanks provided by Saudi Arabia. Do you think the British Army, the government, the forces of the tyrant Cameron would use tanks against me? Do you think that there would be people in central London who had to flee the area because my tanks and my Stinger missiles were shooting down British aircraft? What I'm trying to illustrate here is that the blame for all of these refugees and all the suffering in Syria and all the hurt and the breakdown of society that's happening in all of these Syrian towns, the blame is being pushed towards Assad. He's not a nice guy. He's not a nice guy. He's the head of a state. And states are evil. Statist regimes like David Cameron's, like Assad's, like Barack Obama's, these states are violent and evil. And we do need a revolution. But Assad isn't the only one to blame, is he? Because it is Western governments who are providing tanks to the revolutionary forces. It is Western outside interference that is really pushing the violence. Don't get me wrong, I'm not pro-Assad, but if Westerners didn't help the revolutionaries, if Saudi Arabia didn't arm them with automatic assault rifles, Stinger missiles and rocket-propelled grenades, if we didn't provide them armoured vehicles, then there would be no violence. It would have been nipped in the bud. The reason Assad needs to strafe the skies and bomb his own cities and send tanks into his own cities and break all of the buildings is not because he's evil. It's because the revolutionary force are being trained by Western society. It's because they've been provided with tanks and RPGs. And therefore, it's not easy for Assad just to wander on in with a few police officers and say, "Oh, you're all under arrest, chaps. Please come to jail with me now, and we'll give you a fair trial." No, because as soon as Assad's forces go anywhere near these towns, they get RPG'd and exploded. Their helicopters are being shot down with Stinger missiles provided from Saudi Arabia.
بيني الطائرة مطار تفتنز عسكري تفجير طائرة الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أبو النور الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر إسقاط طائرة مطار تفتنز العسكري الله أكبر.
So when the BBC spends millions of pounds on very well produced so-called histories of the conflict of Syria, don't be fooled into thinking that the blame is on Assad alone. Now, there's an interesting article, amen, I should have said at the end of that, or Allah. An interesting article I came across by a lady whose name I can't really pronounce, but I'll give it a go anyway. Now, the article was by the BBC. It was in BBC News World website, and it was called Syria's Millionth Refugee. And again, we see that face of Cosette. I dreamed a dream of days gone by. It hits you right there, doesn't it? This little face, Syria's millionth refugee, and I'm not going to read out this article because it is a propaganda exercise and it makes me want to puke. You see, next to the article there is a picture of processed meat early death link, and you know that's these things linked together in my head: civil war and processed early death meat. I don't know whether they do that on purpose, but you can see it's by this lady. This very serious-looking lady called Lise Doucet, or Doucet. I believe she is Canadian, maybe French-Canadian, so Doucet. Les Misyriables, Lise Doucet. And she is the BBC's chief international correspondent. Now, I'm not going to labour on the article. I just wanted to illustrate that Lise Doucet, doing a perfectly good propaganda exercise for international human rights policy, was in fact a council member for the Royal Institute of International Affairs in Chatham House. This is how she springboarded her career, by working for a foreign policy secret society who has a history of controlling the press to influence public opinion. And she is the chief international correspondent for the BBC. Now, of course, also doing a sterling job for these secret societies is this haggard old bitch. I mean, this strange-looking old woman with her haggard finger pointing at the lead figure from Les Misyriables. She's pointing at Cosette, that poor, dirty little girl who's been caught up in this revolutionary fighting. She's pointing her finger. It's you! It's you! I'm dressed like you, and you're dressed like me, is what she's saying. Now, of course, she's not involved in the Royal Institute of International Affairs, this Madame Jolie. She's involved with the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. Let's see what she has to say about stuff.
I think in a generation where we have so many blogs and so much quick information and little sound bites, and even if you really are committed, it's very hard to know who to trust and where to go.
When you really care about something, it's difficult to know who to trust, isn't it, Angelina? You crazy, haggard old woman. Yes, it is fair to say that the beating of war drums coming from Western governments to do with acting in Syria is coming closer. Do keep your eye out for the propaganda which is so transparent when you've spotted their ploy, but so effective against those who are still sleeping. Goodbye.